Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Hamilton, founder and chairman of the America's Future Series, here with my business partner, Michelle Pearson, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Yeah, I get the honor of introducing Alex Goldberg. So he is coming up with this next panel. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Goldberg, who goes by the call sign Stoichi, is the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU lead for the strategic defense and commercial engagement for the Texas region. You know what? Hold on one second. I'm having an echo because I'm using my computer. Sorry about that. As an Air Force aviator in the F-16 and the MQ-19, Stoichi has more than 2,000 combat hours. He is the former Defense Advanced Project Agency, DARPA. He is a former Defense Advanced Project Agency, DARPA, and the National Security Innovation Network, Ensign. We love Ensign. They were one of our sponsors, fellow. Currently, Stoichi is responsible for implementing the innovation strategy for the Office of the Secretary of Defense throughout the Southwest region of the U.S. and is as well as acting as a primary liaison between the DoD and venture capital, private equity, and startup communities. Welcome, Alex. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, Michelle, and super excited about this panel. I wanted to take a little bit of time before I introduce our panel members to give a little bit of frame of reference. It's been great to watch many of the different sessions, before this, and wanted to provide some context of what is all this focus on innovation. The startups, modernization, and reform. The DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit, was created by the Secretary of Defense 5 years ago, right? The National Security Innovation Network was born shortly thereafter. AFWorks by the Secretary of the Air Force, Naval X by the Secretary of the Navy, ARCWorks from the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, Army Futures Command, Army Applications Lab, right? The Army reorged for the first time in 75 years. Not even the Vietnam War reorged the Army. So what was the problem that our most senior leaders within the Department of Defense are trying to solve, right? I always tell people that General Hayden, who's the vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, years ago, and by the way, he was just recently in Austin with all the other vice chiefs from all the other services, which are the number 2 of every service. He articulated his biggest fear. What he fears was not China or Russia or North Korea or Iran. What he feared as a nation is that we've lost the ability to go fast, and that our adversaries, right, our near-peer competitors are moving faster than us, right, in space and hypersonics and counter-hypersonics, and now in taking commercial technology and fielding it faster than we are. We used to be the world's leader in speed and flexibility, innovation, ingenuity, and now we are not. It is clear from all the research that we have done, from the intel and everything that we have seen, that is not currently the case anymore. And it's not simply about doing things faster, cheaper, and better, right? At the end of the day, we really haven't had the motivation or the need to actually move faster, right? The bureaucracy, right, has gone, hey, don't break what isn't broke. Don't fix what hasn't been broken. Things have changed. Now, right, we can see in our rearview mirror that many of the things that we are trying to, maintain as a technological superiority will not work, right? Here's the new reality. By 2030, Chinese military will reach parity with the United States. Their GDP, the military budget, and R&D will be larger. 40% of all STEM graduates will come from China, and only 3.6% from the United States. We need to move faster. And that's really what this is all about. Back in the 50s, for every $1 we spent in R&D, right, industry spent maybe 50 cents, for every $1 of ours. Now for every $1, it's the venture capital private equity, community that spends $11. And if you look specifically at things like artificial intelligence, it's like $100 to 1. It's the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks, right? The startup communities that have a lot of these disruptive technologies. DIU is broken down into several portfolios: autonomy, artificial intelligence, cyber, human systems, advanced energy and material, and space, right? These are really big areas where there's disruptive technology, and a lot of this is dual use technology. And it's very hard pressed nowadays to even find technology that is just focused strictly within the DoD. A vast majority of the things that are being developed have this dual use technology. And so this is why DIU was created 5 years ago. It was to go faster, right? To accelerate the adoption of all that commercial technology that's being developed, right? Outside of the traditional prime contractors that have always existed, right? To transform capacity and capabilities across the joint forces and our coalition partners, right? DIU has members across the entire joint services, the joint forces. There's not a, whether it's a Guardian, an Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, we have it all. And so the last piece is really to strengthen our national security aviation base so that we have the flexibility and the speed to respond to anything that our nation needs to respond to. So big picture, right? It's DIU's goal, and many of the folks that you will hear, is about lowering the barriers to entry. How do we reach out to those non-traditionals? How do we inspire, engage, and support, right? Academia, industry, our servicemen and women who have great ideas, and being able to tap into that skill set to be able to help us solve some of these really big national security challenges. Whether it's contracting, cybersecurity, policy, these things are notoriously difficult. And all of us are working to try to tackle that, to make it easier to work with us, to provide the right incentives, right, for our primes to want to work with us, as well as our young startups. So as Michelle said, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Alex Goldberg, go by Storky. I'll be the director for this panel, and super excited to have Ben, Cory, Layne, Abby with us today. And this is going to be a real treat to learn about these organizations, the problems that they are trying to solve, right? And how you can actually join us and serve alongside us or with us in solving some of these problems. So I just want to go quickly around the room. Let's start with Ben. Just provide a little bit of background of yourself and your organization in this ecosystem.
Thanks, Stoiky, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here. A little bit about me, naval aviator, 3,000 hours. I spent most of my career in the cockpit. Prior to coming here as director of Naval X, and I came in March, so pretty new on the job. I was stood up the OPNAV N7 Warfighting Innovation Cell as part of OPNAV's reorg, and before that I was a Secretary of Defense Fellow, Executive Fellow out at VMware in Palo Alto. Fantastic opportunity. As far as Naval X goes, organization is only a couple years old. We're stood up by Secretary Hondo Gertz to break down silos and move faster. So the focus of the organization has been on changing culture and being a platform for connecting. And as far as where we go next, we've spent 2 years really building a foundation of a platform and a network. And now we're looking at how can we actually go and bring folks together to deliver capability to the warfighter in a faster and better way, working with our partners like Stoiky and his group at DIU and AFWorks and the rest of the ecosystem. But I look forward to really taking your comments and seeing where this discussion goes. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Cory, a little bit about your organization as well and your background.
Sure. So Cory Simpson, in terms of background, a career military officer, an Army judge advocate, so recovering attorney these days. Currently work with Ankara, which is a global consulting and professional services firm. Large global footprint, small, nimble mindset, so very agile, help companies with the public-private collaboration and sort of bridging that gap with agile and disruptive technologies. We have quite a team here, former Undersecretary Aaron Connaughton, Vince Stewart, Patrick Murphy. I have the good fortune of working with all of them, and we help companies with the challenges that we seek to as a country.
No,
good to be with you today.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Cory.
Yeah.
Layne, if you can give us a little bit about your background as well in your organization.
Hi, Layne Merritt. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Elbit Systems of America. We have a broad portfolio of mostly defense goods, but also medical instrumentation and civil aviation. We're a parent company in Israel, a large portfolio of really cool and effective technology. I also spent a lot of years in the Army, in Army aviation, both as an operator and a engineering and science and technology leader. So my job is to look across the portfolio, look across the customer needs, and piece things together to provide some really innovative capabilities for the warfighters.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Layne. and my favorite, the Defense Logistics Agency here. Abby, if you can give a little bit of background of what is just your background, and for those people that don't know, what is the Defense Logistics Agency?
All right, good afternoon. I'm Abby Johnson. I'm a career Air Force logistician, and I've served everywhere from unit command downrange to the headquarters staff over at the Pentagon and now at DLA. For those of you that don't know about DLA, DLA is the nation's combat logistics support agency. We manage global supply chain all the way from the raw materials to the warfighter and to disposition. We serve, most people think we serve the services, and we do, but we also serve a lot of federal agencies that many people don't know about. We serve the whole of government, Homeland Security, FEMA. Probably most shocking is the USDA. We provide school lunches around the country, which is something most people don't know.
Well, no, that's pretty cool. Look, all of these organizations are impactful in having helping us solve, right, this larger crisis of how do we move at the speed of relevance, right? So let's go just around the room. Let's start with Ben from Naval X here. Give us a little perspective of how, right, you're on the job for just a relatively short time in the seat, taking over as Naval X. Where is Naval X now? And what does Naval X 2.0 look like? Where do you actually want to go with the organization?
Yeah, so Naval X now really was setting the foundation, and I'll get in a little bit. And our first major initiative was the Tech Bridge Network, and the reason for Tech Bridge is we realized that both internal to our own R&D and external, no one was talking to each other. All right, whereas in industry, like I learned at a place like VMware, everyone in R&D is on the same digital platform, and so you have very good transparency into what's going on with very clear problem sets from the top. And we realized, well, let's just start off on the DoD side and at least get our internal R&D to start talking to each other. So Tech Bridge is a way for internal R&D to coordinate amongst each other, but more importantly, I would say is how can we be a face and easy access for non-traditionals to work with the Navy? And what I get by that is when I was a fellow multiple times, folks would say, hey, I'd love to work with the Navy, but one, I don't even know how, and two, I'm not coming to the Pentagon. All right. And as an active duty guy, it's hard enough to come to the Pentagon and to ask for someone who's, say, never done business with the government before. It's just a big push. So how can we meet them halfway? And so the Tech Bridge Network are co-located with our warfare centers, which are our labs, and we have them all over the country. And it's just a place where we can say, hey, you don't know anything about DoD, or maybe you have a product, or you're a startup or a small business, or even a larger business. It's a place where you can come in and talk to us, where we're going to be wearing, it's a comfortable environment. You're not going to have to go through a bunch of layers of security, and we can at least have conversations. And the idea is, hey, how do we bring you into the ecosystem, figure out what kind of solutions you have, and match you up with problems that we have in the Navy, and then figure out a way to connect the problem with the solution. Because as we know, it's a lot easier said than done, and you need help doing it. And that's what Tech Bridges are about. We also had Center for Adaptive Warfighting, which is taking commercial ideas and applying them to a military context. We can educate our workforce, both active duty and on the civilian side, and new ways of doing business so we can change the culture of the organization. And we also are constantly looking at ways we can use digital tools and, once again, commercial tool sets to make our own folks move faster. So that's where we are. Where I'm taking it is now that we've built this foundation, is how do we actually go in and build deals and get to capability development for the fleet. All right, and that's really bringing in our internal and external stakeholders and guide them to a solution. And that's where we're going with this. And as I'd say, we've been making first downs, how do we go in and actually get some touchdowns? And a huge aspect of this, because it's new and we're going to figure it out, is having that room to experiment and learn, build a little, test a little, learn a lot. And we sort of have a great advantage here that our timing is we have these other organizations that have been doing this for a while. And so working with, kind of like I said before, is I talk to the folks from DIU, AFWorks, Army Applications Lab throughout the ecosystem, so we can go, hey, how have you done this before? What works, what doesn't? And the bottom line being is how can we leverage this ecosystem to bring capability to the fleet? And that's where we're going to try and take this.
Yeah, Ben, just a couple quick reattacks. Can you highlight some of the focus areas where you guys are very interested in, as well as maybe a couple problem sets for those that are in the audience that may have solutions or want to help pitch into helping us solve these challenges? Can you help just provide a little bit of color and a little bit of flavor to some of those focus areas and some of those problem sets that as the Navy, you're trying to tackle right now and are very big initiatives for the Secretary of the Navy?
Yeah, for sure. And so I'll say that goes in with our alignment between the Secretariat and the OpNav staff. I mean, the Chief of Naval Operations, and I'll say it, he's been very vocal about it, and is with the unmanned campaign plan and with Project Overmatch. Those are two of our biggest areas right now. And unmanned is, as or you can actually do a quick search, and I highly recommend everyone here take a look at the unmanned campaign plan, and you can see where our thinking is going for the future. I know it's pretty broad. We don't get into specifics, but I'd like you to just take a look at it and say, hey, there's somewhere where you think you can contribute. You can reach out to us, and I'll give you a great way to do that in a sec. The other one is take a look at the unclassified tri-service maritime strategy. And it will also at least provide the thinking on where we're going. And where the Navy wants to focus. And like I said, I can't give you specific problem sets, but that's where I would like to go, because we do have some specifics, but I can't really get into it in an unclassified forum. But I will say that is where I want to get to, is where I can actually have more specific problems so that you can say, okay, yes, I can engage here. And that's where we need to go. But that's my advice for right now. And the second one I'll say is we just MVP'd a digital engagement platform. And so if you just go to our secnav.navy.mil, and we have links on our newly revamped website where you can go in, and it is a modern CMS platform where you can go in, and the idea is a digital marketplace where you can say, here's what I have to offer, and build communities of interest around the tech bridges under various technology topics, and start that engagement between us on the acquisition side, plus the fleet, and plus commercial industry, and start really seeing where we can work together. And so I highly recommend going there. And if there's something that you would like to be added, we have a DevOps team. So I would love to get feedback on it as we did this soft rollout. So I'm sharing that with you. It's really a week out the door, and we want it to be a tool that's useful for really you to do work with us. And we have a lot of flexibility on where we take it, and I make the say on where it goes. So please check it out, and I'd love to get your feedback, but that's part of the solution.
Fantastic. And so Ben, that the secnav.military.mil, that is the platform by which for industry to be able to interact with Naval X?
The secnav.navy.mil site is our main website where we have links to the digital engagement platform. I want to say it's at navalx.navy.mil. All right. And there's always that little thing you have to click that says, it might come up as this is unsafe, but we do have to go through as anything in software in the military is hard. So don't worry. I've gotten a few emails on is this a safe link? It is. We're working on it. But as anyone who's done IT with the military knows, getting modern tools on a Navy platform is hard. But it's an easy Google search, or those two links can get you there. But I highly encourage you. We want to make this really a platform for all of us to work better together.
No, fantastic, Ben. If you could throw that in the chat, that'd be awesome. And then for Cory, look, I know you're a professor at Clemson, right, on cyber policy. If you could provide a little bit of context and a little bit of color around, the geopolitical aspect around cybersecurity. Obviously, it's one of the biggest challenges in working with industry around the tech sector is FedRAMP certification, right? Getting an authorization to operate on our military networks. How do we get into a zero trusted network where we actually are piggybacking off industry and commercial internet to be able to encrypt and to be able to conduct operations? Can you provide a little bit of a context? I also know the Cyberspace and AI Solarium Commission and report was around speed and agility. So if you could just talk a little bit about cybersecurity and innovation ecosystem.
Sure. So the connection between cyber and innovation, right? Everything's connected these days. 90% of the world's data was produced in the last 2 years. And that's from 2018, right? So we're producing more and more data every day. You know, life's mundane moments are now able to be known. And so we're also developing the capabilities through AI and machine learning to make sense of that data. So you have two big trends: more connectivity, more data, and an increased capability to make sense of that data. And sort of cyber fuels and connects all of that. And there's inherent insecurities built into the system, right? The US did in fact invent the internet, ARPANET, in the early 70s. And since then, there's a Ware report, Willis Ware, that was at DARPA at the time, did a report and said, look, there are significant security issues with this, and we need to think about how we design it moving forward. In short, in 50 years, we did none of those things. So all of those insecurities in the system still exist. And so the challenge of cybersecurity is one of design. The fundamental underlaying of the cyber ecosystem is flawed. It's an insecure system. And in a geopolitical context, that's being exploited, right? It's being exploited by China. It's being exploited by Russia. They're stealing a lot of our IP. And then they don't have, you can make AI better by feeding it data. So they steal our IP, and then they can feed it data in a way that we can't do because we have privacy laws in America. So there's a lot of challenges in that geopolitical context. But I would say, as the cybersecurity or the U.S. Cyberspace Solarium Commission, there we go, which I was a part of prior to joining Ankara, sort of took a look at that and said, hey, as a nation, we really do need to have a new approach to this domain. And it's one in which we need a whole of nation. We talk a lot about a whole of government, but the reality is the private sector is as much a part of this playing field as the government is, if not more, right? The majority of our critical infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector. So one of the real challenges that we have right now in that larger context is just doing things, which was brought up, I think in the earlier conversation, but like our social contract, right? What is the government's obligation to protect companies in this new domain? And that's something we haven't quite answered, and we're answering it as we move along. And there's important questions to be resolved. And then as you get to the zero trust piece, that really speaks to that larger insecurity in the internet, right? We have begun to accept it is almost impossible to secure systems. So really the best we can hope for is to prevent lateral movement within systems. And so instead of a default yes, once you're in, it's essentially a default no. And I think you're going to see more and more trends moving towards systems like that. And that's sort of where we are today. And I would say it also to that larger whole of nation approach, it's going to become vital. And we've talked a little bit about that here. And I hope we continue that dialogue of that public-private collaboration. We're just not going to get to where we need to be without the private sector and the public sector working together.
So for those companies that want to work with the DoD, right? You are just like your company, right? May have certain capabilities, products, services that they want to offer, and they're relatively new in working with the DoD. And you have CMMC, you have all of these different initiatives to, in essence, focus on this more open architecture, modular system, but that is also secure. If you're a new company, you're a startup, you want to work with the DoD, cybersecurity is of a concern. How should you be thinking about this, and where do you even begin to wrap your arms around this?
I'd say think of this, it's a maturity model, right? The CMMC, it's a maturity model. One, I would say take that away and think of it like a profession, right? It's the practice of law, because you never perfect it, right? You're always working to get a little bit better and striving to form a more perfect union. We're never quite there. We're always trying to get a little bit better. Cybersecurity is that. It's something that you're constantly going to have to maintain, and you need to adapt it into your culture. So whatever product you get, people, processes, technology, whatever product you get in terms of technology, if you don't develop a culture within the company of security, you're not going to get there. And frankly, that is the mindset of the CMMC. It took the NIST standards and overlaid into it some cultural aspects that you need to adapt into the company. And I would say that, if I were giving advice to new companies trying to get, into the government space, I would, certainly look at the NIST standards, but I would think about culturally, how do you adapt that into your organization?
No, appreciate it, Cory. Layne, you have a tremendous amount, right, on one of this other challenges that are there beyond cybersecurity. You have all of contracting, right, and acquisition strategies to be able to move faster. So one is, wanted to provide a little bit of context. What is this new paradigm shift between like just requirements and problem set focus mindset for companies of where we were previously and now where the DoD is trying to get to now?
Sure. So, historically, the DoD spent a lot of time defining the requirement, writing documents, and they couldn't even get funding in place and a program approved until they had a very stringent set of requirements. So industry was used to getting a solid deck of requirements and then developing a system to meet those requirements very specifically. The paradigm change is that the DoD is facing a new operational challenge in several places around the world, and they're looking for new ideas about different ways to operate and different ways to apply technology. So what they're doing is stating their problem. I have this challenge or that challenge, and we'd like to hear your ideas about how to solve those challenges. One way to look at that is I have this product that'll solve that challenge. I can adapt this product to meet that challenge. But the way I like to think about it is, how can you operate differently? What kinds of different technologies can you piece together to actually find a new way of engaging the enemy such that they're not ready for it, right? It's about the elements of surprise and about outmaneuvering or out innovating the enemy so they don't know what's coming, and you can do a better job of defeating them.
No, absolutely. And that's very much where DIU is focused on too. And I'm sure Ben can attest the same, and DLA as well, coming from this perspective of, right, it's not just about getting to a faster horse, because that's pretty much all we know. But working with industry and our non-traditional problem solvers, you get to the point of maybe there's a tank, maybe there's an airplane, maybe there's a hypersonic vehicle. The real problem is that you're trying to get from point A to point B. And so DIU is very much constructed to be able to do that. Tell me a little bit about just new acquisition authorities, strategies that you're aware of that has come to fruition relatively recently to help small businesses, to help non-traditionals go in this space where previously they may have been intimidated with the bureaucracy of the DoD, but now things may be a little bit easier. Can you provide a little bit of color on that?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the biggest avenues that Congress opened up is the other transactions authorities, very focused on non-traditional defense contractors and agile contracting methods, right? So they usually form a consortia. They don't have to around that, so that large group of like industry can work together in different ways than they've been able to do before, and very easily. And in that way, even the small, non-traditional, innovative companies that have a critical and elegant technology, but not the full solution, can very easily partner with a mid or large-sized company that has maybe the rest of that around the solution set, and they can put together a full system.
Absolutely. And DIU, we use the CSO with the OTA authority as well. And our ideal is to get folks on contract within 60 to 90 days and kind of hold their hand throughout the entire process. But it gives us a way that it's a relatively low barrier to entry, this whole OTA process, where you can submit a 15-page slide deck. It's relatively low, right? And either you get a quick no, or we're able to move you on through the process. But the process is right from sitting down, right, open solicitation to on award contract. Our goal is around that 60 to 90 days, which has not been previously possible. And then upon completion of that prototype, being able to go into a production contract. Layne, if you could just lastly talk to a little bit about operationalizing the technology, right? How do we actually get to a place where the defense primes are working with the startups, right? There's motivation and incentive to do that, and how small startups can think about their pieces and how they they play into larger ecosystems that already exist to help us move, things faster, cheaper, and better.
Right. Yeah. So what's really important, because any given technology all by itself doesn't solve anybody's problem, right? It's how you apply that technology or how you put combinations of technology together and then how you use them. So it's really important to understand where the military is coming from, how do they operate today, what shortcomings might be identified there, how the threat has changed over time, how this threat operates, and then thinking about new ways to apply the technology or the products or new operational concepts, in other words. And the DoD is doing a lot of experimentation. Project Convergence is one of the biggest examples, and there's several smaller experiments where they're experimenting with these new ideas. So they're very open. I would say 3 years ago, there weren't that many people in the DoD interested in experimenting new operational concepts. We had doctrine, we had tactics, it was all published, it was all set up. And, many a time a PM, I would approach them with a new idea or a new technology and they say, gee, I don't have a requirement for that. I don't even want to talk about it. I got my requirements document right here and it's telling me what I need to develop and buy. Today, totally the opposite. Everybody is looking and hungry for new ideas, and we put in place mechanisms to go out there in an operational environment and try out those new ideas and see how well they work or don't work, so that we can either exploit that and develop it more fully, or we can drop the idea and move on to something else.
No, appreciate it. And lastly, I want to reach out to Abby, right? The Defense and Logistics Agency, can you provide us a little bit of context with, right, this is a massive organization, hugely critical to the entire nation, as you just talked about, all the different entities and tentacles that you support. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the problem sets that you guys face right now that, right, non-traditional companies that are listening right now could think about, at least understand the focus areas where you guys are trying to improve upon speed, efficiency?
Sure. The main thing that we're focused on, at least within supply chain security, regards to supply chain security, we're trying to prevent disruptions in the end-to-end supply chain, from raw materials to the user and through disposition. And we're also trying to standardize risk. We do face some non-traditional challenges that maybe single agencies and units don't face, and that we have 9 different supply chains. We have a global reach and global distribution network that we have to protect. And not only are we protecting the mission, but we're also looking at business risk. We still have a working capital fund. We're still susceptible to audits. And we have to ensure that our risk management is addressing both mission and business.
So what are some of the initiatives that you guys have going on within DLA to help with logistical chain security? Look, we just saw COVID-19. I mean, just completely awaken us to the fact that many of our medical supplies and many other elements, whether it's lithium ion and heavy rare earth metals, are focused in areas. When you're talking about energy efficiency and water efficiency and resiliency, how does DLA look at some of those problem sets, and what kind of technologies are you looking at to solve?
Well, in the past, we had enough money to just buy down risk. And that's not the environment anymore. And that's not the adversary that we're facing either. Doesn't make it so easy. We are trying to use AI, ML, commercial technology, and we have to use science and technology to leverage scale. So no longer are we using a prime vendor that's CONUS, that's within the United States. We have to now look all the way down into second, third, even fourth vendors. And we have to have visibility. So how do we leverage technology to collect the data and to analyze the data? And that's not something that we can just hire a few folks to do, not at the scale that we need. That's why we need the the technology. Not only that, we have to ensure that the integrity is at the forefront of anything that we collect. You know, how do we know the data is good? How do we know that there aren't bad actors playing in the data, or somehow we're getting bad data? Because if we're going to be a supply center of excellence and we're going to analyze risk for all those different agencies, we're also going to provide that information for use for mitigation techniques, for mitigation opportunities. It has to be good data.
So from DLA's perspective, what are some of the organizations and how does someone reach out to DLA when you're trying to work on logistical chain security or additive manufacturing or right to solve some of the problems that you just articulated, with auditing and security along the way there? How can companies interact with DLA as a whole? If you can start there.
Sure. I mean, right now we have kind of a continued interactions with commercial and private industry. We're working with academia, other government agencies. We have DARPA and MIT. We work with some other commercial industries. I don't want to specifically name companies, but most of our stuff works through R&D. And R&D then sends out RFIs, broad agency announcements, and we're really looking for what we're working on, supply chain illumination, everybody that can provide pieces to that puzzle so that we can put together a comprehensive view and a comprehensive analysis, in turn providing a good risk assessment and ultimately mitigation tactics to folks.
And where should they go if they actually do have an idea or they wanted to provide some context on, as you talk about logistical chain illumination, right, and all of the different facets there? How can someone learn more about that particular initiative, and how can they pitch in and provide potential technology solutions that may fit or participate in other ways? Where should they go and how can they participate?
Well, ultimately, I mean, we have a pretty comprehensive website, just the standard DLA website that provides a lot of current information. There are contact POCs within that site. They can contact R&D, who's probably best suited to connect you with the agency announcements and see maybe where you can fit in within the scope of what we're working on. I mean, you can always contact me too.
No, awesome. And I know everyone put in their LinkedIn address and some of the websites, just like if you could put in dla.mil so that everyone is able to follow.
I'll do that.
We'll do a quick round the room. If there's any, questions, I don't see anything from the chat, but I at least wanted to open up and take the conversation wherever the audience wants to take it over the next, 10 minutes to be able to steer the conversation. And if not, I have, several other follow-ups that where do you see our biggest challenges and the things that we want to tackle, right, to make it easier to work with the DoD? And I'll start around the room. I'll start with Ben again. I'm just giving us some perspective of what do you hear as the biggest challenges for these startups that are intimidated, right? Bureaucracy, right, has its place in that it perpetuates what works. Create all these streamlined processes in the whole 9 yards. But when what works no longer works, it is really tough to navigate. It's tough to us, right? They can't get onto a base. Even if they got onto a base, who are they supposed to talk to and engage with? So if you could provide a little bit of context to what are some of the other big challenges and how maybe Naval X helps some of these startups actually connect and make it easier to work with the DoD.
Okay, so I'll start off. I'll go over stuff I can control and that which I can't. First and foremost, it's how we do finance. I mean, it comes down to, as any startup knows, it's about, not running out of runway, not hitting your fume date. And so number one is navigating the system, and so that you get paid and you can keep the lights on, right? So I think that's the biggest, number one issue has to be, how do we figure out a business model that makes it worthwhile for startups to do business with us? And there's a lot of initiatives we have going on that. But that's the number one problem, and that we'll work with you to do. And like we talked about OTAs, and there are a handful of other tools at our disposal to do that. And the number two thing is I want to work with the military, but I don't know how to. And that's where we need to be a partner throughout this relationship. And that is something that Naval X will do. And it's not just to hand off and go to this website and do all this paperwork, and navigate it yourself, because that's just not going to work. And so it is not thinking transactionally, but thinking of building relationships and a partnership to walk you through getting from A to B. And that's what I'll say on the challenge side. And I was literally just talking about this today, and what everyone else is used to is, hey, you find a problem, hey, I have a solution, and so you go meet the two together and it's done. For us, there's all this gobbledygook in between, or makes it very difficult to navigate the different stakeholders. It's not just who, I have a problem and a solution, but who's the champion, who can actually cut a check, what color of money is it, where are we in the pipeline, are you early stage R&D, or is it something more that's pretty much close to being done? And then we can help you navigate that and be like, hey, maybe this is something we can go to our POCs at DIU to do. Maybe this is something, let me talk to the AFWorks folks and see if they've got something they figured out. Or it's something we can work on together and make it joint, because the joint staff, there is a ton of experimentation money, and somebody had mentioned that earlier. And if you're doing something joint, there's a ton of experimentation money. So what I'll say is, and what's really challenging is, no two deals are the same. All right. When I first got to OpNav, and we're trying to put these together, there is no like, here's the approach, go do it. Everything's a little bit different depending on the context and the people involved and the specific problem that we're trying to solve. And so really that's just challenging. They're all a little bit different. And I think the only way to look at it is from really an entrepreneurial mindset. It's just like, we have to match that mindset of like, we need to create value and find the resources to do it, create a compelling pitch, and get folks on board. And so I think that's the way we go about it. Yeah, tough challenges, but you get through it. And then the last thing I'll say is really, where are the problems and who's thinking about how are we going to use this? Don't just go to the fleet, because once again, we'll want a faster horse. Who's driving the train? Is it technology that's driving the train? Is it fleet needs? Or is it, who are the folks really thinking about how we're going to employ these, and how do we get all these people together in the same room? How do you combine the operational art with the tactical proficiency with the commercial ingenuity to really build a solution?
I completely agree. And I think a huge part is, right, when you start with the problem set, right, going all the way through transition, right, to navigate all the way from trying to get to a place where we understand the problem, and going all the way through the funding, and transitioning to a program of office for a long-term recurring revenue. These are non-trivial. These are all the different barriers and programs that we're trying to create to cover what we call the valley of shadow of death, right? There's a 3-year POM cycle within the government. Even when we want the solution, it takes 3 years to be able to actually budget for it, and leveraging all of the resources and capabilities from all these disparate units so that we can talk to each other, so that we can create efficiencies. We just knew that in the past, it wasn't required. Now, in order to compete into the future, we do. So we need academia, we need industry, and obviously Naval X is a huge piece to integrating as a tech bridge, as a matchmaker, to navigate people, businesses, seamen, Marines, that want to have an impact, yet just don't know how. So love the organization, and super excited with what you're going to do with that. Layne, let's talk to you a little bit about, from the strategic contracting side, how should, as a business, when you're working with the DoD, maybe some lessons learned or things that they should think about in embarking upon, right, DoD contracts as a whole?
Sure. So we all have fun being innovative and developing new ideas. In the end, companies have to make revenue, right? And when we talk about new kinds of technologies, we don't really have an established way to sell, and the DoD doesn't have an established way of buying these things, right? Software is something that's already been identified, but what kinds of software? If you developed a a cool algorithm that helps somebody make decisions or helps make a weapon system somewhat autonomous or fully autonomous, the time spent on that isn't the big cost. But you know, something like that is really powerful, and the company that comes up with the ones that work should get compensated for it, right? But we don't have a really good way to buy that. We can do a bill of materials for hardware. We can talk about manufacturing processes and times and production line tooling. All those things are easy to cost out, but the value of, you know, really clever software and combined systems is pretty hard to cost out and pretty hard to buy. And I think we're going to have to tackle that. There's some commercial models that might work. And I think we'll probably have to come up with some new ones that'll work for the DoD.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Layne. Cory, if you can talk a little bit about what should a company think about in regards to cybersecurity of that first initial couple steps in embarking upon working with the DoD?
Yep. I'll answer that, but I want to jump onto something that Ben said. That relationship or that partnership between the private and the public sector, whether it's the DoD, state, whatever government entity it is, the government, to become a better partner, has to think, you know, a little bit differently, less transactionally, and more relationship based. And then I think from the private sector too, just patience with, you know, hey, we don't all speak the same language. And that is true. You know, the CEO's language is different from, you know, the CISO's language, which is different from the general counsel's language. And I think as we all pull together from the private and public sector, understand we don't all speak the same language. Be patient in those communications and embrace the relational aspect. Like, if we're going to get through this, if we're going to have real innovation and we're going to have real security, the public sector has to come together with the private sector. That's just a baseline true. It has to happen, and it's going to take a little give and take from both ends. And I think, you know, specifically to your question on security or cybersecurity, I would get back sort of to where I began and say you've got to develop that cultural mindset within the company. And really think through how you're adapting cyber into your operations and particularly into your innovation.
Oh, fantastic. And then Abby, just from a perspective of where DLA is, for those people that are not familiar, compared to DLA versus, you know, Amazon, right? I do Amazon Prime all the time, just like everyone else, you know, on the call, I'm sure. Provide a little bit of context of where DLA is compared to Amazon. And understanding, right, in this symbiotic relationship between industry, what have you learned from them? What have they learned from you? And what does, you know, DLA 2.0 in the future look like?
All right. We get this question a lot in logistics, right? Why can't we just be Amazon? And I'm actually not going to go there, except to tell you, in my opinion, we are better than Amazon. We deliver to places Amazon can't touch. And we do it in a contested environment many times, and we do it based on efficiency and needs, not necessarily on who pays the most for Amazon Prime. But where we're at,
have you been able to leverage a lot of the technologies that they have to streamline, or the relationships between?
Sure. I mean, we leverage a lot of commercial technologies, and we send, you know, within the agency, within the services, we send a lot of people out to career broadening programs with places that are known to have good distribution chains, good supply chain networks. And we have them learn what they can from there and then bring that back to the service. Where we're at right now, we're putting together a proof of concept. It's been awarded, and we're beginning that here now. But I think what industry should know, and what I want to highlight is, like the other panelists said, there's no single product, there's no single agency that can solve this problem. DLA doesn't physically handle, you know, we have a few warehouses, but we manage over 4 million parts, but we don't physically handle those. We're not doing the distribution. We're not building the part. And so we need access to databases and information that we don't own. And so it's really imperative that we all work together, both commercial industry, other government agencies, within the services, so that we can all have access to comprehensively identify the risks and the vulnerabilities within the supply chain network and within the DLA managed items.
Right.
And hopefully it gets big enough that everybody can use this.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate, I mean, as you just foot stomped, right? This is a whole of, right, community, whole of state, whole of nation approach to be able to help us where we started this conversation, for us all to move faster and become more efficient and effective, especially in a fiscally, and resource constrained environment that we are going into. So appreciate you all being a part of the panel today, and thankful for all your insights, and back over to the America Future Series.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me.
Stoichi. I've got to say thank you. It's great to have this combination of people talking about this important problem and working together. It's fantastic. And Stoichi, you're a rock star. You are invited anytime. We appreciate your enthusiasm, your passion. You can run a panel any day.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. And thanks for all the panelists.
Thank you all.